Hi everyone, my name is Nadia. I'm a representative of Svitla Systems, and I welcome you to yet another webinar, which we created in order to give our experts a chance to share their knowledge and experience. Before we begin, I would like to say a few words about Svitla. Andrei, can you please skip the slide? Thank you. So Svitla is a global IT solutions company. We are headquartered in California, but we have 8 global locations around the world. We have been on the market for almost 19 years. We celebrate our birthday this October. We have reached over 900 people, and we worked on over 1,000 projects. So we have some kind of experience to share with you in terms of various industries, because we have different projects from all types of industries, and we work with various technologies. So today's webinar we devoted to front-end, and I'm more than excited to welcome our Chief Technical Officer Andrii, who will present his talk about front-end frameworks. These are React, Angular, and Vue. We know that some of you prefer React, some of you prefer Angular, and the constant battle will never end. But today we will try to find a winner or not. And we welcome all of you to join us in this exciting journey. So Andrei, please take the mic and have a nice talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia, for such warm welcome. So hi, everyone. My name is Andrii, and I am CTO at Svitla. I represent over 20 years in the IT industry, and I'm also an avid photographer and sports fan. So if we have a battle, then there should be a ring. So with that said, let's start. So I briefly go through agenda and describe what we're going to talk about. So first of all, we will start with most important holy war between framework and library. Then we will go through frameworks and discuss some ideas about these stacks. At the end of presentation, and I will give you some kind of advices where I see usage of each particular stack based on preference of our clients, and also based on my personal experience working directly with small companies and big enterprises, such as, for example, Amazon. So let's start from history, because unfortunately, history impacts decisions that you make in modern days. And the most critical and fundamental thing for web development is a holy war between libraries and frameworks. If you go to Quora, you will get hundreds of questions discussing how to call what is library and what is framework. But our approach and our understanding is that library is something comparably small that can be plugged to your code to solve a particular need or particular problem, while framework defines approach, tooling, and vision how to solve specific problem. Speaking about web, framework defines how you should develop your front-end application and how you manage whole life cycle of it. And usually frameworks is also included in 1,000 libraries. Some of them are core to framework, others are included in their repositories and can be added when needed. So why we're talking about frameworks? The main problem with frameworks that all of them are started as libraries by 1 or 2 clever engineers that they decided to change the world. And right now we ended up in a situation where we have hundreds of web frameworks. If you go to GitHub and search for front-end framework, you will get hundreds of names, but only few of them are alive through multiple years of history, and only some of them are mature enough to use them in projects that you will encounter. But again, there is a huge mass between understanding which framework is stated for what. Some frameworks are cross-functional, some frameworks are solving particular need, but we will concentrate on 3 major players on the market. And just before we proceed to describing them, I would say that unfortunately, goals in our modern life is changing frequently. The same as IT professional goals changing frequently, you are as a specialist changing your goals, the same framework changing their direction, and sometimes they change in direction even completely opposite way. And that's really has a huge impact on engineers and their understanding of the frameworks. So before making a decision, you should think about changes and read some information about framework, even if you're familiar with it a couple of years ago, because it might change dramatically. So let's start from the basics. And I hope everyone who is working with recent web familiar that everybody started from a jQuery. And idea of jQuery was to add some interactability to static websites, because World Wide Web started as kind of newspapers. You read a newspaper, you're scrolling through different pages, and you're consuming information from the pages. So web was non-interactive when it started. But then later on, pages demanded to consume additional information without flipping page. Giving you an example, you want to read weather, right? Alerts, and you want to have them directly on your newspaper. The problem there, if this information about news alerts, weather alerts will be updated, the whole page will be refreshed. It's annoying. So that's why people invented jQuery as initial idea, just to update some small parts of a page in some kind of periodic way. Not real time, as you have in modern chats, for example, just periodically, let's say 1 time per minute. So that was the main idea behind jQuery. And then some clever people figure out how we can abuse that. And we can use this to create really interactive apps, and we can really start to have interactive applications. And it ended up in some kind of world where frontend completely separated from backend and stated to be completely independent entity, which we have right now. But again, all of this has these same dependencies to jQuery. In modern technologies, this is overcome by some way, but even 4 or 5 years ago, there was a huge dependency from that single-threaded approach of fetching data from backend, as it was long time ago. But what happened with that? If you survived in IT long enough, you remember such thing as Outlook Web Access, you remember first versions of WebSkype. The people discovered that they can create web applications that look like desktop, horrible desktop, I would say. So if somebody used Outlook Web Access, you remember that feelings. They think is not giving you as near user experience as desktop app, but it was mimicking it in the same way and trying to give you the same workflows. Thanks to that, people figured out that it's not a good idea to put desktop apps as they exist on desktop and migrate them completely into web, because technology has limitations. But despite that, some applications already emerged and started to be translated to web. That's why we get 2 separate worlds powered by the same technology, web application and websites. All of them are HTTP based. All of them are using the same underlying technology. All of them are using browser, but the behavior of them is completely different. So to give example, I would like to compare experience of our clients and basically say that if you're working with TripAdvisor website, your main goal is what? Is to get information about specific booking that you look or specific place. You are consuming information more than you're interacting with it. Versus if you work with Facebook, for you, the main thing is interaction with data, and the main thing for you is content creation as well. So you are creating content. And if you provide similar experience from TripAdvisor to Facebook user, that would be horrible, and vice versa. Because giving you example, uploading photo on TripAdvisor, yeah, you get some basic approach. For user, if he does it non-frequently, that's okay. But on Facebook, you're constantly uploading photos, and if your user experience on uploading photo is horrible, then you will stop doing that. And proceeding with that question and that idea of separation that we have to words, web application and websites, we go back again to jQuery. And I would reiterate it one more time that the goal of jQuery was as simple as that, as fetching single data from a server, not multiple ones as later involved. And I remember that time in 2006 where I was an engineer, and one of the ideas which was for using jQuery is adding interactive counters, adding interactive progress bars, but basically getting only some information. But here it comes, hard strike from Google. Google, as you remember, first of all, is web-based company. They created a search engine. They created a web-based email. And for them, it's critical for user to interact with their applications directly in the browser. So that's why they started from simple interactions. Previous versions of long time ago, Gmail was not interactive completely. And they started to add interactivity to their application. And they started to add complex JavaScript to it. What they finally find out that they have in a spaghetti code and thousands of lines of JavaScript in a page, which is completely non-manageable. So the basic idea of Angular was to separate JavaScript into parts. And that's what they were trying to solve with their first way of component application and component approach. Please do not confuse Angular.js with Angular 2. It's like some completely two independent words, and they're completely different. Later on, the complexity of Angular was growing more and more, and Angular started to concentrate on everything which is required for the web application. So the group of Google engineers created Vue.js just to serve and be, let's say, template engine, simplified template engine for Vue presentation. And Vue.js right now survived this history almost already 10 years, and it's keep growing. And React guys, as I mentioned, you comparison TripAdvisor to Facebook, their problem was different. They were not concentrating on complexity. Instead, they were the main pain point for them was interactivity of applications. And as I mentioned before, browser get a very huge number of limitations how he can consume multiple threads of information. And updating that thread of information was really painful slow. So if you're down to 7-8 years in a history, you might remember old Facebook, and that old Facebook sometimes were lagging in your browsers and taking time to update your even newsfeed. That's the reason, because there was no solvable approach to multi-threading and support of updates of web page update. But what changed right now? The more I see comparisons between the frameworks, right now everyone says, look guys, all three frameworks do the same thing. True that or not, that will be subject of further discussion. But again, you need to understand my previous slide saying that changes are unfortunately inevitable. Changes will happen. And that's what happened to frameworks. Frameworks keep evolving and start to share similarity features between them. So let's go. And before proceeding further, I would say for you, there are many engineers which are engineers in mind, and they like to reinvent the wheel or start the something new and apply something new to real life work. Unfortunately, we are kindly against micro frameworks, and we do see from the past that micro frameworks and frameworks who are just starting is not ready for production. They are like playgrounds of some engineers. They're usually supported by 1 or 2 engineers. And if you rely your commercial application on these frameworks, unfortunately, you may fail at some stage. And unfortunately, some frameworks could be out of support. And before proceeding further, I would like to iterate one more what's changed in recent web application. The recent change, which started with introducing frameworks that I listed before, is SPA approach. And you may think about SPA approach is like dynamically updating the page without reloading the page, and ability to have multiple background processes happening in parallel while the user is viewing the page. So for user, process looks seamless because he views the same content, while in background, application is fetching data. And for user, it looks like he's using normal application, and that normal application works for him like a charm. But as always, unfortunately, there are some issues with it. Let's start with one that was active, let's say, 3 years ago, browsers. Each browser has been created by different company behind it. Thanks to God, Internet Explorer finally died, and we have Microsoft Edge, which is officially based on the Chromium stack, and it's behaving as expected, not as previously we get Microsoft Explorer and the rest of the world. But this is really pain. Why? Because the same code unfortunately behaves differently in different browsers. And right now still this issue exists. Why? Because some companies are deciding not to include features that are part of standard to their browsers. And some companies are adding more features and advertise them, and they started to be famous and being used and not working in a different browser. The recent example that one of our engineers team has faced, that SVG format, which is widely distributed, unfortunately is not well working on the some versions of Firefox, because basically it's not supported. An application heavily rely on SVG has issues displaying it. And that's one of the limitations. You never guess which version of browser your client is using. Thanks to recent world where finally Apple Store and other markets are in place, web desktop applications automatically updated, and thanks to that you have a modern and latest runtime engine. But that's not always true for all cases. So let's go to other stuff. Unfortunately, data is still important to websites like TripAdvisor. It's more important to person to see the data and to make it viewable than what to interact with it. And finally, there is other guys who are non-human beings, robots TXT file, you probably all aware about it. And these robots need to examine your application and be able to search through content. And it doesn't work that way for SPAs. Why? Because when the SPA is loaded, it doesn't have any content, and it dynamically loads that content, and robot has no clue about this dynamic content. So to keep your application modern and responsive and also be suitable for web, you need to be balancing always between native approach, usability approach, and needs of web. The classical example of that is Medium. So on a Medium, when you are reading it, you're reading classical web pages. You're scrolling through it, you have your own navigation, you have accessibility mode from a browser. But when you're editing it, you instantly switch into classical web approach, and you encounter yourself in Word-like experience. Everything is smooth, application is rendering viewer quite nicely. You have ability to edit stuff. Everything is smooth. So if we talk about lightweight applications, unfortunately, in this world, AngularJS died because AngularJS become very messy and very big in terms of size. It started to be over 1 megabyte of library total, and that library was loading forever, breaking user experience. And that's one of the reasons why basically AngularJS died. And on top of it, it also died with Angular Material.js, which everybody started to love because it was a nice introduction from Google to proper UI design. But Google learned their mistake and started to release Angular 2, about which we will talk in a second. For solving small problems, many small frameworks appeared that was solving only simple problem of dynamically displaying and updating data. But because they were concentrating on a smaller problem, it ended up in people writing a lot of JavaScript code and integrating libraries that have different approaches to the same problem. So just to give you an example, you might end up in using two libraries, one for example, for logging, and second library for data visualization, which will also contain logging features. And basically, you have two frameworks doing the same thing, which is not correct approach. As I mentioned, AngularJS is dead, and Angular 2 appeared. What is good about Angular 2 and the way how it's been used? Google not only created front-end programming ecosystem and programming language, because basically they introduced also TypeScript. They also created a full ecosystem of tools that allow you to use and effectively develop applications in a very strict approach. Angular is not a massive framework. Angular is well structured. And it also comes with a ton of integrations of Google products. So if you want to develop applications that heavily rely and integrate with Google ecosystem, Angular 2 is perfect choice. Why? Because all integrations with Google products are already in box, and they are already tested out by Google team, and all support libraries for that products is well tested. Giving you an example, one of the most popular products of Google is Firebase. The library for Firebase in Angular is tested first, and the new features for Firebase is released firstly to Angular SDK integration of Firebase, and then been released to other integrations. It also includes TypeScript, and it's funny that TypeScript was invented by Microsoft, but it is integrated to the Angular 2 first as a native toolchain for development. And in TypeScript, you finally have classes, you finally have that joy of programming language that you're familiar with, versus old JavaScript approach where you don't have any types and you have issues with memory leaks and stuff like that. It also includes profiling tools, which are working out of the box because they understand how the tools interact with each other. But the limitation there, and it's quite big, that if you want to have a proper application written in Angular 2, you cannot migrate. You need to write your application from scratch using Angular 2, which is unfortunately a bottleneck and some hard stopper for applications. But we do have experience with multiple projects where complex UI development was performed for ERP systems and integrations with multiple providers. With that idea, integrating multiple data streams into one application and integrating multiple complex UI interaction, Angular has no compromises. Why? Because the approach Angular takes is the same for all kinds of applications you develop, and architecture for the front end for all Angular for applications stays the same. So if you have somebody who's familiar with Angular 2 and understands its core, he can pick it up any project based on Angular 2. And that's one of our main advantages that we like about Angular 2, its maintainability. So we get a couple projects which were dropped and transferred to other agency, and then for support, and then they were returned for us to support and to create bigger features. And they were not screwed up. Why? Because the architecture stayed the same. They only developed new services and new components that were integrated in the overall picture. And you cannot break this overall architecture because it's been already set up by Google. That's one of the biggest approaches and advantages of Angular that we see as software development company. And we are really excited when someone says, here is existing Angular 2 application, please support it. Because we know that it will follow a good practices, whether even this agency that developed previously wanted or not. But for some cases where you need only data presentation layer, Vue.js is used heavily. Vue.js is the only, let's say, library, and I'm saying Vue.js is a framework, but it can behave as a library with minimal tooling. And it's a main advantage that it can be integrated with even all plain HTML websites with adding Vue.js template engine to spice it up and some integrations. We got a couple clients which were enhancing their old application coming from 80s even without jQuery with Vue.js, and it doesn't require to rewrite everything into component-based approach. So we really like Vue.js for that simplicity. And the other advantage of Vue.js is poor JavaScript approach. So it's completely going JavaScript approach, and it's quite easy to support existing application and integrate Vue.js. So you could have your old JavaScript code perfectly working, and you add Vue.js and you add some pages integrated and interactions integrated from your new functionalities that you're developing. And potentially, your application can be upgraded quite easily. But as I mentioned before, the passes of frameworks can change. And Vue.js 3, which was introduced two years ago, break a lot. They looked on most successful framework, which is React right now. Oops, I'm spoiling stuff, but never mind. And Vue.js started to mimic some features that React has, expanding it in other direction. But what we see right now, the amount of demand on Vue.js due to that change to Vue.js 3 recently changed a lot in negative way, because one of the features and why people used Vue.js is that it can be used to upgrade legacy application and it's lightweight. Vue.js 3 is no longer lightweight. It includes a lot of features that are found in more heavy frameworks, and it also introduced some concepts that were found in more heavy frameworks in current state. Okay, so I started already talking about data presentation. And what we see in Vue.js really shines is ability and components for data presentation layer. It already has ton of pre-built components already in NPM repositories for data presentation and for data visualization, and all of them lightweight. Just to give you an example, to build that kind of data visualization project, it took us some really comparable small amount of time, because the grid component that you see here was perfectly pre-built for Vue.js and was available. And this component can be integrated anywhere. It can be put in a legacy application, and it will not conflict with all of the legacy stuff. It can be completely separate. And what we see currently, the Vue.js is used, main usage is upgrading and enhancing legacy apps, and not being used in new modern application development using microservices. For microservices approach, we see more and more people are using React, and I will tell you later why. So why React? I spoiled it already. Why React is that popular? The main advantage of React, as we see, it's kind of mix of two frameworks that I mentioned before. It has some strict rules in terms of how tooling should work, but how platform behave is completely up to engineers that set up tooling. You could set up React with specified React to Vue stack JSX, but you can use React even without it. You could add state management. You could use TypeScript or use vanilla JavaScript with some limitations. You could potentially even integrate React just by using plain hooks and mimic that Vue.js approach. And React is very flexible, even if we look how to start a project. Just by giving example how you start a project on React, there are multiple ways how you can create basic architecture of tooling for the React app. What it also means, it means that if you get project in React, you are not, the word just React doesn't mean anything. You need to see the tooling beneath the hood it uses. And there are many ways of how tooling is implemented in recent days. It's keep changing, it keep evolving in a more automated way, but there are at least multiple templates that can be used. And even for creating SPAs, Create React App is not a single template. There are multiple templates from even vendors, which include recommended library there. So what really important about tooling of React, that it creates basic tool chain without asking you to write any boilerplate code or think about integration of tool chains like Webpack and stuff like that. It's all automatically been handled completely by React. And just to give you two opposite words how React can be used in modern days is example of recent Trello words that is completely rewritten by Atlassian team using SPA approach. And Trello finally behaves like a normal application. It behaves like a small brother of Jira. It finally interactive. It finally works fast. But interaction with it is quite charming and usable. If you compare a previous version of Trello, that was a horrible user experience. Why? Because previous Trello was a website overloaded with ton of interaction added there on top. So there was no user flow, there was no complete user behavior integrated together. Right now, the Trello is a perfect example of SPA which behaves as it is expected. But unfortunately, You cannot satisfy all needs, as I stated before, with just using React for SPAs. Here is server-side rendering comes in place. An idea in that is instead of loading SPA as it is, you are given already a first part of content for user to view. And while user views this content, browser fetch more data from backend and then starts to execute it. But immediately there are already prefetched and preloaded content which is already displayed. The great example here is portals of video websites such as Twitch, for example, HBO and others. When you log into HBO or Twitch, the first thing you see static content of thumbnails of the channels that you want to view. And only after some period of time, you start to interact with them. And that's already enough for user to give better user experience than to wait some time while the web application, SPA application loads and starts. And that gives incomparable experience to user. Here is what really changed over the past 2 years, and I'm really excited about that. And I hope after this presentation, everyone will be excited as well. I'm just asking, could you raise a hand who's ever heard about Vercel or Netlify? I will go to chat right now and see if anyone heard about it. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, I see one hand. Two hands. Okay, that's good. Out of 50 people, somebody heard about these technologies. And what I'm really excited and why I'm thinking that it's actually a future, and some of our clients already proved that, is that idea behind Vercel and Netlify is to integrate everything that existed before into one complete package suitable to deploy serverless front-end applications to cloud without any hassle. And the idea behind that is that these companies provide integrated tool chains for engineers that includes not only development tool chain, but it also includes ability to automatically publish applications and make them available instantly. In the way that content is being pre-rendered, as I mentioned in server-side rendering previous screens, and being published as a static with some dynamic screens. And the system itself handles changes to the dynamic content where needed. Sounds complicated, but later I'll show how simple it is. And this change really changed a lot for the guys who previously were thinking about having separate backend for applications. Previously, if I was talking to mobile developers and front-end developers, they were saying, oops, we created complex front-end application, and for that we need backend because we need to add business logic. And for that they were using products like Backendless or Airtable. There are many more, which essentially were solving ability to add business logic to presentation layer. There is no need for that anymore for recent application development. So everybody heard about GraphQL, I guess. GraphQL is way nicer way to organize and structure all data coming from backend into single entity. So REST is nice, but REST requires you to know schema, requires to know your entities, and requires to know how to query the data and how to use it. In GraphQL, you can play with data coming through it, right through browser, right through sandbox, and figure out and work with documentation right through it. So recently we got 2 successful projects using using Apollo. Again, I am asking, anyone heard about Apollo? Could you raise a hand, please? Okay, that's good. That's probably more hands that I expected. So Apollo is the future, guys. You're not figuring out this at this stage, but the way finally to centralize APIs into one manageable state and manage it as data source is enormous change. Unfortunately, the world goes around. Previously, we got the same functionality with SO AP, but that was not solving all problems. It was very complex. The SOAP schemas were complex. That changed with GraphQL. GraphQL is fun, and one of the most important features, GraphQL includes a way to test and play with data without even implementing it. So, and one of the nicest features of GraphQL that it can be integrated with business logic, and business logic can be exposed as a data. And that gives you advantage to integrate everything that your front-end application needs into single entity. And all you need is actually hosted GraphQL server, for example, Apollo, or you can get some query engine from some databases. Right now, I've been on Oracle conference, and they also seriously thinking about adding GraphQL directly to their databases. Even there was a huge resistance from Oracle in that area. The other option for you is, if you're more concentrated on the content, is to use headless CMS, such as Contentful. Again, Contentful is huge right now. Contentful is growing probably faster than any other CMS systems on the market. Why? Because they started to pioneer that approach where the content is completely separate from the presentation layer. And it's up to you, front-end developers, to define how the presentation layer should look like, and you consume just endpoints from Contentful. Contentful uses very simple model for querying data. And right now we have an active project in which Contentful is serving 40 countries across the globe from the same data source, but each region has its own presentation layers, which are integrated to payments and stuff like that. So it's very simple to create a front end which is completely independent due the technologies that I showed before. So right now the change in approach is going to Gem. Everybody who is to music knows what Gem means, but here it has a different meaning. It has JavaScript API and markup. So recent web application looks like following. It has just JavaScript with some framework on front end, which is React. It has presentation layer with markup and integration with any access layer, which GraphQL is ideal. For it, what it means for developer? For developer, it finally means that developer could concentrate on delivering value and forget about how this value will be visible to clients. And I'm happy to say that this thing is probably killing DevOps stuff in years, future for the web stack development. There is no worry about how to scale web development application. There is no worry how to scale your web service serving the web stack content. Forget about it. Basically, all you do is you get your UI packed into repository, and then magically this repository is already integrated with continuous delivery system from either Vercel or as Netlify, and magically it appears on CDN. And if it appears on CDN, it means that everybody from a world can access it. It means that you get in cloud commodities which allow your application to work faster than before. Because previously you need to worry about how should I distribute my dynamic content, how I should place into multiple data centers. That's completely gone. You don't need to worry about it. But when you have a strong business logic, which cannot be completely integrated in semi-static content, if you need complex integrations, what you do, you just add simple hooks to your application, and that simple hooks goes to cloud functions, for example, or they go to lambdas, or they go to other technology, and these hooks work completely separate, but they just return result to your web application. And what is really important, and what is really shines to me, that you need to forget how you build your web application, and you do not need to have your own CI/CD pipeline. It just gone. The idea of optimizing assets, idea of atomic deploys, ability to change stuff, it's all gone, and it's completely solved by your cloud provider. And the next question that I usually get to that is how hell this is reliable or not. And these technologies are already reliable because under the hood, they're using already Google ecosystem or other cloud providers ecosystem. So it's another layer on top of your traditional infrastructure providers. It's more infrastructure for your content. It's more infrastructure for your web stack content. If you're interested in learning more about GEM, in this presentation, I included some slides to read for. But after this presentation, everyone will ask me the same question. So are you really mad about this hype of GEM? Other stuff exists? My short answer, yes, other stuff exists. For example, you probably read a lot about Remix, but the only reliable production-ready ecosystem at this stage is GEM, and popularity of GEM is growing more and more. One of the conferences that I attended, a lot of people, most questions were about GEM architecture, how it changes. And when people realized that there is nothing really changes, why? Because you continue to use the same tool chain of React plus Next.js, but with some included spices from specific vendors that automate deployment of your applications. And you're using the same console that you get used to developing your applications. But packaging and deployment and atomic operation of that has been already solved for that. So with it being said, I say you please go check it out, GEM. It's awesome, and that's definitely a way where world is going on in the web stacks today. Thank you so much, and after that, I am open to questions.
Thank you, Andrii. It was a very exciting talk. We already have some questions for you. So question number one, what tech stack would you recommend for enterprise applications?
Yeah, so all depends from whether you're developing it from scratch and how complex the application is. If it's something small, then again, GEM. But if you're going to develop an ERP system or some large enterprise app, Angular right now is your choice, or again, React, but you need to do huge amount of work defining architecture and how the application should behave before starting actual development.
Okay, thank you. Next question, how much does it cost to migrate to modern web stack?
That's a tricky question because it talks about money. Just to start with, it all comes whether your business are ready for the changes. If your business is understanding that agility of your business is slow and IT is dragging you, then you need to invest your money into potentially rewriting some stuff and adopting it. But if you want to implement it as simple as then just try to use Vue.js and add some interactability to your existing applications. But later on, it will not solve your problems and it will not solve all your stuff, but it will help.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Anyone? Okay, then I think we're ready to wrap up. Thank you everyone for spending this time with us, whether it was a morning for you or evening or an afternoon. We will send the presentation to all of you, so you will receive your takeaways. Absolutely, don't worry about that. And once again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on our next event. Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.